Namaste and greetings. I, Gupta, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Learning. We are gathered today for day 8 of an online international autumn school program, a 1 month immersive online intermediate certificate training course on contours of public policy in India in the Amrit Kaal. This training program is organized by IMPRI, Center for the Study of Finance and Economics, CSFE. This course will be chaired by Professor Mukul, visiting distinguished professor, IMPRI, former professor, Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore, NUS. The panel of conveners comprises of Dr. Devendra Singh, Senior Visiting Fellow, IMPRI, Dr. Simi Mehta, CEO and Editorial Director, IMPRI, and Dr. Arjun Kumar, Director, IMPRI. The experts for today's session are Professor Anil K. Gupta, Professor Mukul, and Mr. Yash Agarwal. I welcome all the participants to this enlightening deliberation. And thank you for being interested in putting your time, energy, and efforts into understanding. Sir, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible, Tripta, but it is not me who is speaking today, but Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan.
Right, sir. Apologies, ma'am. Right. So I welcome all the participants to this enlightening deliberation, and thank you for being interested and putting your time, energy, and efforts into understanding emerging issues pertaining to the Indian subcontinent and helping us to bring together the practitioners and participants through this course for impactful policy research and action. We have also shared the course outline and reading resources in your email for your kind perusal. Before we start today's session, I would like to remind the housekeeping announcements once again. Please join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Kindly share your questions in the Q&A box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Kindly ensure that your questions are precise and refrain from making any general comments in order to save time. Now, without further ado, let us start the program. Our first expert for today for a session on science, technology, and public policy is Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan, former Ambassador of India to Greece and Cuba, former member of India's National Security Advisory Board, Science Diplomacy Fellow, Research and Information System for Developing Countries, RIS, New Delhi. We welcome you, sir. It's an honor to have you amongst us today. If you could please take it from here. Over.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be part of this program, which IMPRI is organizing. And very happy to do my bit in discussing public policy and especially the science and technology aspect of it. So let me now share my screen and then we'll go ahead, because I think that's a better way of proceeding. Okay, so the session is going to be on science, technology, and public policy. I've left out innovation, though I'll mention it. Innovation is also a very important part of this. What is normally discussed as STI, science, technology, and innovation. However, let's go ahead. Before we start, let's see what are some basic concepts and why do we need a policy for science and technology. Now, science, as most of you know, is the basic knowledge of nature, and technology is the practical application of such knowledge. Innovation, on the other hand, is how we adapt scientific knowledge for practical purposes. Now, all countries, their governments have certain objectives. And to put it in the simplest form, the objectives are national security and securing the best quality of life for the people. And both these are to be understood in the broadest sense. How does science and technology come in? It has a strong impact on the international system. It can confer economic power and military power to a country. And it can also, as we are now seeing, the artificial intelligence has a disruptive effect on society. Therefore, the state has to respond to advances in science and technology. It cannot remain aloof. So it's like a horse. The horse is galloping. You have to be in the saddle and control it, how it goes. So science, technology, innovation, policy, and practice is very important. And governments at all levels have a role. The central or federal government, state, and local and even city governments play a role. Now, science, technology, and innovation takes place within a national ecosystem with many players. This ecosystem of ours interacts with similar ones across the world, like US, UK, Europe. And these interactions must be managed and exploited. We'll come more into this later. So public policy requires an appropriate and effective response to all this. We are not in an isolated island. We are part of the global ecosystem. The national ecosystem is there. It has interactions with external ecosystems. Now, science and technology has moved from small laboratory, Madame Curie, working in a garage, and now it's with large institutions with large budgets. I mean, we can see Manhattan Project during the war. Governments and business have got involved in funding of science and technology, and they have built large facilities and put in place policies. Now, very important, science and technology knowledge comes from a human brain. And that's very, very important. That's the necessary condition for advancement in science and technology is human knowledge expertise. Private and public sector entities also play a role, but skilled human resources are an essential component. And this underlies the whole knowledge economy. Now, while this is necessary, it is not a sufficient condition. There are other things required also. Now, science and technology has a disruptive effect. It can change the balance of power. For example, atomic energy, the nuclear technology changed the whole balance of international power. Also, economic activities, for example, ICT can change. It can give you competitive advantage. Within countries, it can increase inequalities and cause job displacements and losses. Now, since science and technology give you economic and military power, obviously countries try to control over it. And now the control can be formal and informal. The formal control regime is the IPR system, where you have to pay in order to use some science and technology. And informal is the regimes like the Nuclear Suppliers Group, Wassenaar Arrangement. This is not a treaty, but it's a group of countries who work to prevent this. Now, of course, when technology is denied, countries try to acquire it by overt and covert. Overt means that you enter into technology collaborations, you pay for the technology from the provider. Covert means you do some sort of spying. And there has been issues now. For example, China has been accused of spying on US, within the US to acquire technology which it cannot otherwise get. Also, if technology is denied and you can't get it, then some countries will try to develop it themselves, indigenous development of technology. For example, we had to do this both in our nuclear and space program. North Korea is doing its own development of nuclear technology and so on. So because of all this, we can't rest. Society is not going to be stable and unchanging. It will always be turbulent, and science and technology advances will always create new challenges, and we'll do that in the future also. So some basic ideas about public policy and science. Now, it's similar to economic, cultural, or sports policy and other domains. It means that science and technology must be integrated into public policy. And we can just look at it maybe 2 or 3 aspects. The science in public policy, where scientific inputs and advice go into making public policy. Then you have public policy for science. That is, how does public policy strengthen the S&T ecosystem? How do we strengthen our scientific muscle? The science for public policy, that means how do you strengthen the support for public policy through scientific evidence? Now, the science, technology, innovation ecosystem, about which we'll talk a little later, is part of a national ecosystem. And a strong science and technology ecosystem is very important for national development. So public policy has to put this at the center. Now, where does science come into public policy? The increasing number of global challenges such as climate change, artificial intelligence, cyberspace, all this, these are all heavy with scientific content and public policy. So you need scientific understanding. So many of these challenges are transdisciplinary and they require understanding and application of science and technology as well as public policy. Therefore, it's important that scientific experts must dialogue with policymakers so that an informed and appropriate policy response can be fashioned to challenges. Developing countries are particularly at a disadvantage in this effort because, firstly, important science advances originate in the advanced countries. And by the time they reached developing countries, a lot of international agenda and things have already been set. So they are more or less reacting to this. So it's important that developing countries strengthen their capacity to integrate science into public policy. And this is very important, especially in areas like climate change, environment, and health, because they affect population, entire population. So policymakers must have a minimum level of scientific knowledge. Not they don't need to be experts, but they should be aware of some of the important implications of science advances. And therefore, puts a responsibility on scientists that they must communicate in policymakers and stakeholders the implications of new advances and developments, but not in academic jargon or in academic papers, but in clear and understandable terms. So this is very important. The public also needs to be told that, look, these are the things which will happen due to certain advances. Now, how does public policy strengthen science and technology capacity? Well, you need to react well in time to new science and technology developments so that you have early and timely responses to emerging and new developments in science. There's also, you need to participate more actively or more effectively in international discussion in science, technology, and global challenges, whether it's climate change or cybersecurity or whatever. Then you need to facilitate participation in large international science and technology programs and projects. For example, like CERN, a Large Hadron Collider. We have other like the ITER project. Now, what these programs offer, because these are facilities which are beyond the capacity of individual countries. They require large investments and a lot of effort. But participating in such programs is a very cost-effective way of getting a seat at the high table of science. So public policy must encourage this. And in a way, we are good that we've got involved in some of these programs, like CERN, ITER, LIGO. But then there are some programs that we didn't get involved in. For example, the Human Genome Project, and then the International Space Station, when it came up long ago, we somehow didn't get into it. So these opportunities should not be missed because this is going to happen more and more in the future. As science and technology advances, the cost of doing research is going to go up. Bigger and more powerful facilities will be needed. We can't afford, even the US can't afford to do it by itself. So this is going to be a growing sector. Then we need to support and facilitate science and technology exchanges and how it is commercialized to get concrete economic and strategic benefits. So here the problem is many of our scientists and researchers, they are more focused on publishing papers. They are not fully focused on the IPR side of science research. So what they are doing, it's not enough to just publish a paper. Of course, that gives you credit. But then you need to also see where you can generate the IPR from. Now, for this, it is important that at the early stage of scientific projects, when projects are being formulated, science research projects are formulated, some thought should go into what is the IPR which can come out of this. And that's also a selling point, because if you can submit a research proposal where there is an IPR potential, And obviously funding agencies and others will be more willing to support it. Now, some countries have built this in very well into their in system. For example, Israel, the Weizmann Institute of Science, which is a research university, they have their IPR experts who sit with the scientists right in the early stage when project proposals are made. So this has a beneficial effect. Then another aspect is how do we fashion public policy so that the STEM diaspora, that means the science, technology, engineering, and medicine diaspora, which is in huge numbers in the US and advanced country from India, how do we make full use of their capability and attract and retain talent? So one part is those scientists from India who are working abroad and in good positions. How do we engage them into our activities in different ways? We'll come to that. The second is how do we retain our talent, graduating out of IITs and our institutions, because the best of them often they seek opportunities abroad. So how do we retain the best talent? And third is how do we get the best talent from other countries? And there you see the US, Canada, Europe, even China now has got programs to attract scientific talent from across the world. So there'll be a competition for growing, for attracting talent. So question is, are we doing enough to attract talent, scientific talent from abroad? As I said, science and technology, the essential thing is the human brains. So the best brain, if you can attract, then you have an advantage. So now, for us as a developing country, development issues are very important. And science and technology and innovation is also critical. So we can use science and technology for our development issues. And we can also reduce the cost of development by using science and technology. So technology will enable us to do more with the limited funds we have. For example, the mobile phone has enabled the entire population actually to be connected and accessed for various things. Like it could even be used for literacy or health or telemedicine. So, we don't have to follow the old route, what the advanced countries followed for development. We can leapfrog in using technology and do more with less money, frankly. Now, development is to be regarded both ways, including our economic development, social development, as well as national security. So we can do both these, all these areas, we can work with science and technology. So the international community has realized the importance of technology in the achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, so-called Agenda 2030. They have set up a technology facilitation mechanism under the UN with various UN agencies involved to help with meet the targets. Now, unfortunately, this mechanism has not really gotten off the ground. It has been organizing occasional meetings, but the actual flow of technology and supporting finance has been weak. So this needs to be, it's an opportunity here for India and other countries to do. So I can talk about that a little later. Now, as far as the Sustainable Development Goals is concerned, NITI Aayog is the Indian coordinating agency for this. And you can look at what work they have done, the developing of indicators, to see how different states in India have performed. So it's a very rich field for young researchers and public policy to get into. This whole effort to achieve the SDGs and being undertaken at various levels within the country. Now, obviously, it is very important for developing countries to share experiences in development. So, for example, if we have something, found a way of handling, say, cholera or some disease, that has obvious implications for many other countries which are also facing the same problem. So, experience sharing among the South is very important. And then in the South, we have frugal innovation because we always have limited resources to use. So money is scarce. So we have our innovators often find solutions which are very cheap and effective. A simple example is the bicycle ambulance, because we have roads are not good, villages have only a bicycle track connecting them. So somebody has come up with the idea of attaching a kind of thela to a bicycle. So it becomes a bicycle ambulance. So like this, there are a whole lot of innovations which have emerged, which are use less resources. See, these are quite important for developing countries. Now, at the G20 summit, during the time of the summit and in January, India announced two initiatives, which are quite important. One is the Global South Science and Technology Initiative, and that is meant to share India's expertise in fields like space, atomic energy, health, all the science fields to the global south. You know, and similarly from other countries in the global south, what they have to offer, we can also benefit. The second initiative was which announced by Prime Minister was India will set up a Global South Center of Excellence on Development. And this has recently been operationalized under the name of Dakshin. The name Dakshin has been given, and the center is coming up with the help of RIS, Research and Information Systems, because they already had a global development center, which was a project which was going on, and this fits in quite neatly with that. So we expect to see more about this Dakshin entity in the future. I talked about the science and technology ecosystem. So what does this consist of? Well, it's a complex ecosystem, and these are the parts: government science departments, state and local agencies, research institutions, academic institutions like IITs, CSIR labs, and so on. Then the human resources, both internal and external. So internal means those who are working within India, and external, those who are outside, who are potentially can be engaged. And the researchers who are deployed. How many researchers are deployed in various scientific work? Research infrastructure and facility. This is very important because you can have money, you can have researchers, but if you don't have the facilities and infrastructure, they cannot produce the result. So funding mechanisms, funding agencies, regulatory agencies, because some kinds of research have to be regulated by the government. For example, medical research, gene therapy, for example, or research on dangerous pathogens, etc. Then there is an IPR subsystem that there are patent office, the patent system, the patent lawyers and the people who file the patents. And then how do we convert the IPR into actual business? That is incubators, business development centers, and overall business environment is very important. How good is this ecosystem as far as enabling a young researcher to set up and convert his knowledge into business? Business community is very also important. Civil society, consisting of consumers and also involving social activists. So they are the ones who actually consume the result. Social activists important because sometimes the misinformation can result in a backlash against some product or technology. So a strong ecosystem can attract and retain global talent. So if you have that's what happened, for example, in the US or Europe. Their ecosystem is very strong, so they can attract talent from all over the world, including from our country. So STEM talent tends to migrate to better ecosystems. So maybe as we improve our ecosystem, we will be able to attract global talent as well as retain our domestic talent and even get back some STEM talent which has gone abroad. The public policy must try to strengthen the national STI ecosystem. There are some metrics by which we can measure how good our national ecosystem is. One is the research intensity of GDP, how much we spend of the GDP on research, researchers per million population, and output of publications and patents filed. So these metrics are tabulated and updated by UNESCO and the World Bank and other organizations, and they are OECD, and they are all available. So we can compare where we stand in relation to other countries. So let's look at that. Our spending, first metric, research intensity of GDP, we are at 0.7%, and we have remained at about 0.7, 0.65% for about 4 or 5 years. But that is much lower than other major countries like the US, China, Germany, Israel, and Korea. The US and China are spending like 2.8, 2.1%, and much larger economies. So obviously, their total funding for research is very much bigger. Korea is a leader with 4.6%. We can't hope to reach that. But we should try to reach somewhere between 2 and 3%. That is something which is important for India. Number of researchers per million population in India was low, 262, compared with China, Brazil, even Brazil, Russia, USA, and even South Africa. So, of course, we have a large population. So, even if we have many researchers, the ratio can be low. But still, this just shows that we need to go much more upwards in this metric. And most of our spending on research and development is dominated by the government sector. The private sector is relatively low, about 35%. Now, in an ideal advanced country setting, the private sector spending on R&D is really comparable, 50%. Now, research output by way of publications, we are not too bad because out of the sheer number of our population, we are the third in the world. But if we compare per million, well, we wouldn't be doing so well. And then patents filed in India, well, 44% of patents were filed from within India, researchers within India, and 56% by researchers from outside, mostly from 5 countries. And patent filing activity in India, we are at number 7. So we still have some ways to go by way of patents filed. The R&D spending of government agencies dominated by 12 agencies. Big one is DRDO, which has 31% defense, and these are the others. You would see that ICMR is about 3.1 because even though it has we have a big health challenge. The big 3 are DRDO, DOS, and DAE. These are the 3 big spenders, ICAR too, and the others are much smaller. The participation of our universities, both public and private, in research in India is quite low. Most of our universities are still focused on delivering education rather than R&D, except for maybe the IITs, IIScs, etc. Now we have a new education policy 2020, which is designed to improve the performance of our education sector, including higher education. And their policy calls for a National Research Foundation to be set up. That is one of the important recommendations. That has recently, there's been a legislation passed setting this up. Government is in the process of setting up the various machinery of the National Research Foundation. Hopefully, this will enable funding for research to be mobilized and used much more smoothly. Higher education institutions are now under the new education policy. They can develop international programs to benefit and attract talent from abroad. And we have seen some of our IITs establish campus in the UAE. IITs have gone to Tanzania and other countries. So there is a demand for Indian. See, a lot of foreign students come to India to study. And very often the applicant students, they ask me very often, that why can't we have a campus of an Indian institution in Africa? So there is the potential for aggressive higher educational Indian institutions to go and set up campuses in, for example, region like Africa or in the Middle East or Southeast Asia, etc. So as science, technology, innovation policy of 2013 is being revised, and there have been a lot of consultations going on from 2019, 2020, and a new draft policy has been published after consulting a lot of stakeholders. But then this policy is not yet finalized by the government. So we are hoping that pretty soon the government will also issue this policy. In 2023, the government issued a space policy, which opens up this sector for participation of non-government entities. That is opened up for business and private sector on various activities, both in the ground segment as well as in the launch vehicle, as well as on satellite payloads. All the entire sector has been opened up. And clearly the idea is that it is time that the Indian private sector took up a lot of the work in the space economy and left ISRO to do the real challenging cutting edge research. So that seems to be the idea. And so far the policy has evoked a good response. We at RIS are engaged with InSpace and Department of Space. We have a project on space economy development, basically to see how our space economy can be derived, can be internationalized, how we can strengthen international linkages and presence in foreign markets. Now I'll come to a few specific areas of science and technology. In the health sector, we have just come out of the COVID challenge, and you can see what all happened. We had suffered a lot. We also did a lot of work through vaccines and other things. We helped many countries, both with vaccine, protective, and we also asked the WTO that please suspend the patent rights on COVID-related products for a limited period of time. So we made a big effort. I think we got some good results there. And then we used IT very effectively for the CoWIN platform as well as for other things. But of course, all countries found that their public health infrastructure had gaps, and we also had gaps. You remember we had bad experiences with migration, people migrating across the country during the epidemic, during the shutdown. The question of whether the shutdown was the best way to deal with this, a total shutdown or a graduated shutdown, all these issues came up. Not only India, China, all countries face this problem. So we are now developing, and the international community is now working on a framework for pandemic preparedness and dealing with pandemics. And by May 2024, we expect this final document, final thing to emerge after international negotiations at the WHO. Then in nuclear technology is another critical area. It's very important for our power program. It's also very important for our strategic program. So we suffered a lot, especially after we dared to undertake a nuclear test. But slowly we are now emerging out of this isolation. We've got a normal nuclear commerce thanks to the waiver, and we are trying to get into the energy. And our policy is that we have an independent nuclear program as other nuclear weapons states do. So we want to be treated on the same level as the other 5 officially recognized nuclear weapon states. We have challenges because there are new treaties which have come up, which to our mind do not accommodate us in a particular way. We have to deal with 2 countries, Pakistan and China, which are nuclear armed. We have a very good record of nuclear safety and security. We have an independent regulatory board, and we have a lot of applications developed in medicine, industry, and all that. So we are developing our nuclear power program. Both the indigenous reactors as well as the imported reactors are part of that. And we are also developing new types of reactors using thorium as a fuel, as well as small modular reactors. So now there is a thinking in the government to open up the nuclear sector to private sector participation. And so far, the opening up has been for custom applications of atomic energy, including medical applications for cancer treatment and irradiation for the agriculture sector. BAE has developed technology for using nuclear radiation to extend the shelf life of products like potatoes and other vegetables. That's of some interest. Another sector of very great importance, climate change and energy transition. So India, because of its size and economic growth, is a big player in climate change. No solution in the world is possible without India being in it. So the basic problem is we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to avoid climate changes. And how do we share the reductions, both across countries, within countries, etc. So climate justice and per capita emissions are important. Presently, we are at 1.1 degrees centigrade temperature rise, and carbon dioxide equivalent concentration is 410 parts per million by volume. 450 is the point where experts say is a danger limit. So we have growing energy needs, so we have to meet these energy needs. So obviously, we have to reduce the fossil fuel energy and push the non-fossil fuel based energy. And this is especially true of solar energy, nuclear, hydro, wind, biofuels, and hydrogen. All these are available. A little more work has to be done because we are used to burning coal and gas and all this to produce power. Now we have to think of tapping other sources. And we have to also think of how we can manage our transportation better. Electric mobility, buses and cars, then storing of energy both in homes and businesses, is very important, because if we can store energy and we can produce energy in the daytime, store it and use it at night. Simple as that. India is doing whatever it can to fight climate change. We have ambitious targets for renewable energy, peak emissions. India is actively involved in the International Solar Alliance. We're promoting it. And also the new Global Biofuels Alliance, which was announced during the G20 Delhi Summit. International negotiations are not working too well. There are a lot of issues there. And civil society is very unhappy with the progress. And as you know, Greta Thunberg and many other people, they keep putting the pressure on governments to make better progress. So the role of subnational entities and civil society is very important to climate change, because they are the ones who are going to suffer. And so their voices, if they are articulated, it will put pressure on governments to really come to agreement. And also, for example, under Trump administration, the US government pulled out of the Paris Accord. But big states like California and New York, which are actually bigger than many countries, they said, we will remain committed to the Paris Accord. So here we have, it is not just the central government, but large entities within the country whose support is very important. And these applies to big corporations also, big multinational corporations. Some of them are bigger than many countries in the economic side. Look, COP, Conference of Parties 28, which will be held in Dubai, is going to discuss a lot of difficult issues. And the issues are the question of net zero fossil emissions. Now, what has happened in India, as well as many other countries, have put forward this idea that we are not going to commit to zero fossil fuel emissions. But what we are going to say is net zero. In other words, we will have coal and gas and plants generating power. But if we can remove the equivalent of carbon dioxide, which is emitted, then there is a net zero. So what they're saying is, give us the space to keep some of our coal and other plants functioning, provided we remove the CO2. So net zero is a new thing. This has caused a bit of a upset among the European countries. They are not happy with this. I think they need to be better understanding of what we are talking about. You cannot overnight shut down coal or gas plants. So this net zero concept for fossil emissions gives a kind of transition period. And this includes removal of carbon dioxide, carbon capture and removal. The other very difficult issue is the loss and damage fund. Many developing countries have asked for a special fund to compensate them for loss and damage caused by climate change. So what they say is, look, we are hardly emitting anything, but we are facing so much of damage due to cyclones and other climate-induced disasters through no fault of our own. So we need help. So initially, the developed countries totally opposed this. They said there's nothing doing. This is not even on the agenda for several years. But now, in the last COP, they were forced to say, okay, we'll discuss it. So now active discussions are going on the loss and damage fund. How will it be funded? Where the money will go? All that. So this is a positive development. Green climate financing, the pledge of $100 billion per year the Paris Accord has not yet been met. And we are putting pressure on advanced countries, the rich countries, to fulfill this commitment. Now, there are new technologies for lower emission products, including removal of greenhouse gas. There is a carbon capture, use, and storage technology is coming up, whereby we can remove carbon dioxide from both the plants where it's produced as well as from the atmosphere, and convert it into fuels or store it underground. So that's a negative emission technology, which could be very important. It is at the initial stages. A lot of science work is going on in this field. So it could give us a relief from the pressure of climate change. Now, there are some talk, the African countries met recently, and they said we must have a carbon tax. That means anybody who, by producing or consuming a product, contributes to carbon emissions, there should be a tax. And the tax should be calculated according to how much carbon dioxide is produced in that process. So this is a carbon tax idea. The idea is that the people who pollute or emit more must pay. So this also applies to within countries. So we have a very rich segment of our society, which is a lavish lifestyle. They are emitting a lot of carbon dioxide. Well, the argument is they should pay a tax. The very poor people who don't contribute to carbon dioxide emission, they should not suffer. Then the EU has got a new proposal, carbon border adjustment mechanism, starting 1st October. And this is going to cause a big headache for international trade. Because what they're saying is that if you produce aluminum or steel in your country and you emit more carbon dioxide, then when you export it to our country, we are going to charge you a tax for the amount based on the amount of carbon. So obviously our business and industry will face problems in the EU market. So this is a hot subject. The next few months, our companies and who are doing business with the EU, exporting to the EU certain products, they have to be prepared how to handle this. There is a transition period of 4 or 5 months where tax actually will not be paid, but tax will be calculated. And then from 1st January next year, the tax will kick in. So it is a challenge for our business that here you have 4 months, get ready, prepare for this. Don't wait till the last minute and then start shouting that, oh my God, our products in the EU are going to suffer. So we have had fair warning. We are resisting this. The Indian government is saying that this kind of thing should not be done. In the WTO, we are saying that this will cause disruptions. But, the EU has firmly decided to do this. So we have to deal with it. ICT and digital infrastructure, I don't need to go into too much of detail. The main thing here is that digital manufacturing, artificial intelligence can cause a lot of job disruption. They can also give you a lot of advantages. If you can master these things, then you have a huge advantage. Social media has grown enormously. It is now becoming a challenge for governments because the messages, anyone can put out a message on social media. So governments now can't really control the narrative to the extent they were doing before. Cyberspace has become an area for criminals and terrorists to operate. So old treaties need to be revised. We have ICT enabled things in healthcare, education, finance. You all have used UPI and all those things, so you know about it. Business and government processes are being IT enabled. So you can sit at home and do a lot of your government business. Digital public infrastructure, which India has developed, that is the Aadhaar, the JAM Trinity, the Aadhaar UPI payment system, as well as the health, all these software packages. Many countries are very interested in this because they have seen how we have been able to spread it out. And our Ministry of Information Technology has signed agreements with at least about a dozen countries to give them access to this technology, and we are doing this free. We are not charging like Microsoft or Google or one of these tech giants. Life sciences, we know now how to manipulate DNA, and that enables us to change life, create new organisms. So this has a great impact on health, agriculture, and environment. But some research needs to be regulated. For example, should you allow scientists to work on developing a new and more deadly form of Ebola, or a new and more deadly form of avian flu? So how should this be regulated? And how should you regulate the industry so that these things don't go into the hands of terrorists? So these are all issues coming up. Regulation of R&D and harmful effects of biotechnology. Then there are ethical issues coming from, because now we can modify the genetic content of human embryos. We can modify the germline, and we can produce, in theory, we can produce better human beings, taller, stronger, bigger brain capacity. Should these things be allowed? Or should we say that, okay, you can do this kind of thing, but only to treat certain genetic diseases? For them, it's all right, but you can't use it to enhance what you think is a human capacity. I mean, you might do this, but whatever creature you create, after 40 years, how do you know there will be no bad effects? So, we have to be a little humble about what we can do. Then there's a question of biodiversity protection. Today, our many species are in danger of extinction, dying out, and there are many species which are coming into new habitats and creating problems. There is a new type of mosquito which is spreading in African cities, which is resistant to a lot of materials, and is spreading malaria. So we can have it coming here. This is the mosquito which it is Anopheles stephensi. It can live in cities, unlike the older mosquitoes, the other ones, and it's very well adapted to the city environment. So we could have a new outbreak of malaria spread by this mosquito if it comes in from Africa. So all these things are there. Climate change and environment protection, these are all affect life sciences. Environment protection is a huge but undiscussed problem all over the world. Today, our air, water, oceans, and soils are polluted with harmful substances. These are entering the food chain, entering our bodies, and reducing our life and causing disease. And we have any number of this in India. I mean, yeah. The fact that you don't die tomorrow or you don't get sick tomorrow doesn't mean that what you consume today and you keep consuming, after 20 years, you will not get cancer. So these are all things. Lead pollution is there in India because it comes from the spices and even our cooking vessels. We do have it. We have managed to get it out of petrol and diesel, but it's there in other areas. So there is an effort. The UNEP has been asked to set up a new body, scientific body, like the IPCC, to look into the effect of harmful chemicals on ecosystem. So it is time that we had a very strong scientific group looking into the various chemicals that are going to the environment and what are the harm they cause, how they can be countered, all these things. So this body is going to be set up within a year or so and should make its own contribution. There is a new plastics treaty which is being negotiated. India is active, in fact, India actually introduced a resolution in the last unit. So plastics which are being dumped all over, including in the oceans, they release micro and nanoplastic particles. And these particles go into the environment and they go into the animal and human food systems. So this causes damage. They enter into our body. And India is playing an active role here. So these are all problems in the environment which require multidisciplinary action and multi-stakeholder. We cannot deal with this problem at the government level or by industry. Civil society and consumers must be involved. So that's why the Prime Minister has announced that on 1st of October, we should have a major effort to clean up our environment. And he's asked for every citizen to get involved in this. So we have to increase our consciousness and involvement at all levels. Then the issue of STEM diaspora. I said there are a lot of, the Indian talent in the US is enormous. I mean, we are leading so many companies and so many programs. So why can't we get them involved with our science effort? And all at central government, universities, business, all of them must have this opportunity. We should have flexible policies, simplify processes, remove bureaucratic delays for the flow of global talent come into India. We shouldn't have too many clearances, too many visa problems. If somebody is a talented scientist who wants to come to India to give a lecture or to do a project with India or work with Indian scientists, we should have minimum obstacles for this to happen. So it is not that we want people to leave their job and come to India. That may not be the best solution. But we want them to work where they are with Indian institutions and strengthen our institutions. Give them our knowledge, give them the knowledge, help us network with us. And nowadays with ICT, you don't have to be physically present. You can collaborate online. Our universities need to harness the alumni connection. Most of the IITs, they have a huge number of alumni who are working in the US. So why don't they have a good alumni association? Our IITs should not take the approach that once somebody passes out, they're finished. They should say, look, we have created this human asset. This is our fellows. And we should remain in touch with them and bring them here or inform them about what they can do for our country. This is the approach of just saying that, look, oh, they've graduated now, our responsibility ends. We have given him a BTech. That's not the best thing. Government alone is doing some things on its level, but government has limits. They have done the CSIR, Prabhas, Ramanujan fellowship they are giving, but these are all drop in the bucket. We need to do much more. So NEP 2020 offers some guidelines for what to do. But the STEM Connect is very, very important. If we have to go ahead in science and technology, we have to make better use of our overseas STEM talent. And also make sure that our STEM talent don't migrate that much. Give them a better system here. So I'll conclude by just saying that, look, science technology, there's an enormous amount of room for involvement in public policy, and public policy also has an enormous contribution to make to science and technology ecosystem, and especially for achieving our national development and the SDGs. So I'll stop here and look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an informative session. Before we move on to the Q&A session, I would request Mukul sir if he could provide his views. Mukul sir, are you here with us?
Yes, thank you very much. Ambassador Bhaskar, this was really very comprehensive presentation, and it highlighted many of the practical policy initiatives that we need for realizing the goals of Amrit Kaal, becoming a near developed nation, and to address the integrate science, technology, innovations into public policy better. One thought that after the COVID and even the climate change discussions that many analysts have raised is how important is the trust in the output of science and in what the scientists themselves are taking positions publicly and in the scientific institutions, because there is a feeling that COVID, for example, was not very well served by the science and the scientists as well as scientific organizations. So how do we address this particular issue of trust, which comes in public policy in many guises? Because lack of trust often prevents governments from doing necessary reforms.
Do you want me to respond to that or wait for a few more questions?
We can wait for a few more questions.
Let's do a round of questions, 3-4 questions.
Yes, sure. Let's have more questions, please.
Gupta, go and ask your audience.
Yes, we have a question from Ashish ji. Ashish ji, if you could ask your question. If not, I could.
Yeah, Professor Balakrishnan, many thanks for your insight. I was just wondering whether the multi-level governance of collective action problems is in itself responsible for some of the problems we face, and two, whether the evidence base has its challenges for developing countries in terms of the impact analysis of these problems like GMOs and climate change. So I'd like you to reflect on whether the current multi-level governance poses or brings about certain challenges, and two, whether we have adequate evidence based on the impact analysis of these collective action problems.
Okay, one more.
Great. Does anyone have any questions? You could feel free to raise your hands. So if not, you can go ahead with these two questions as and when.
Okay, any case, I think we are now close to 7. So let me take Professor Ashif's point about the lack of trust. That during the COVID, there was a feeling that scientists, scientific community is not being handling it well. The COVID was totally a kind of a new experience, not only for public and civil society and policymakers, even for scientists, it was a new thing which came out of, literally came out of nowhere. I mean, even today, we don't know from where it came. Although there are suspicions that, look, this was because somebody was tinkering with this bat, virus and released it. But whatever it is, so the scientific community initially was also taken by surprise. But I must say that within a record time, they not only sequenced the virus genome, but they also turned to, and that is where I must give credit to industry, they turned to producing an effective vaccine to control this. So there, I think the scientific community did a very, very creditable job, I think unprecedented. Nobody has made a vaccine in the time limit which this one was done. But where did they fail? I think they failed in the area of epidemiology and control measures. Like, the scientific community did not, or maybe some of them should have focused on how best to control the fallout. Should we have a partial lockdown, and what kind of lockdown should we have? Should we have it only in focus areas and so on. So there was a big variation in response. Some countries didn't have any lockdown, like, for example, Switzerland. Some countries went to the extreme, like China, lockdown everybody. We also had a fairly severe lockdown. But then I think the government realized that, look, we cannot keep doing this indefinitely. So I think the scientific community there missed an opportunity to really come out in front. Even the epidemiology was a bit confusing. Some people said India will have X million cases. Some people said it will be Y million. The models were not adequate. So I think there's a lot of work in that area. The social dynamics of the pandemic, that is where, and here I think social scientists and scientists need to work together. And, this question of trust deficit comes in many areas. For example, even in GMOs, there is a big trust deficit. That brings me to the second question also. So, this, as I said, it is very important for scientists to explain the implications of their work in clear and understandable language to non-scientists, policymakers, civil society, everyone. So rather than just publish papers and, go about in their rarefied circles, they need to come out of that and communicate with the public and in clear and understandable terms. I mean, that is also good for the scientists because, Richard Feynman, one Nobel laureate of physics, an outstanding teacher, he could teach the most advanced concept in physics to a first-year student, could make it understandable to even a layman. So he said that, look, if you really understand the science you're doing, then you should be able to explain it to somebody who knows nothing of science. So that is very important. Now, the second question is about multi-level governance. I think what I wouldn't blame the multi-level government. It's important to have different levels of government involved: the center, the states, the districts, as well as the cities. See, they all have their respective roles to play. And in our system, for example, health is a state subject. It is not the center subject. The center only plays a coordinating role. So for better or worse, we have set up our system where we have, under the schedule of the Constitution, distribution of powers between the center and the state. Now, this I often feel that the public, many members of the public don't appreciate this. So if they know, for example, that the state government has the responsibility for health, then they would hold them more accountable. Education, another sector, concurrent sector. So I think the existence of multi-level government is not a bad thing. And even multi-sectoral government, that is going outside government to say, civil society, private sector, everybody must get involved in tackling a common challenge. The question is how best to synergize and coordinate all this so that we don't duplicate or waste resources or work at cross purposes. Like, simple example is one ministry doing something which has a negative impact on the work of another ministry. So per se, the multi-level government is not the issue. I think the issue is more of coordination of work of all actors. Now, GM crops, yes, this is a very interesting example. We have had a very high degree of activism by social activists working against GM crop. The same is in Europe. But, in Europe, the problem is somewhat different. In Europe, a lot of the opposition is because the European farmers are worried about losing out if GM crops come in, especially from US or Brazil or others. In our case, the GM crops can offer a huge increase in productivity. And I'm convinced that over a period of time, it will come. I have been serving on the Genetic Engineering Advisory Committee when I was in service in the government. So at that time, we were discussing BT cotton. Today, we are discussing mustard, brinjal, so many other crops. So sooner or later, GM crops will come into India. Whether it is through the approved route or whether it will leak in or whatever it is, it will come in. So the thing is, this is an issue we have to handle it so that we have the best results for everyone. For the farmers to have higher productivity, for those who are worried about biodiversity, to make sure that the traditional varieties of crops are not do not become extinct. So we have to preserve the biodiversity of our crops. So all that can be handled. It's not something. Then of course we have to have better systems of monitoring the content of GM in various crops because European Union has a ban. You cannot export to European Union anything which has GM content. So we have to have labs which can actually measure, well, is the GM content 1%, 0.5%, 0.2%? So do we have those kind of labs? So, all kinds of things need to be done. But per se, GM itself is not. Technology is rarely by itself evil. It's how we use it that makes it good or evil. So that is my response to that. Let's see if you have any more questions.
So I think that would be all. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank you so much for answering all the questions and for such a wonderful session.
Okay, thank you, and good luck to all your participants in public policy. I hope you will go on to make your contributions in public policy, if not within the government, from outside the government, by putting your pressures and your suggestions to whoever is in charge. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those kind words, and thank you so much. For the next session, we have Professor Anil K. Gupta, Head of Division International Cooperation, Advisory Services, E-Learning and Media Portfolio, Director of Projects and COE, Full Professor of Policy Planning and Strategies, National Institute of Disaster Management, NIDM, New Delhi, for a session on India's initiatives for balancing sustainable environment with other goals. We welcome you, sir. If you could please take it from here. Over to you.
Thank you for your invitation to join this very important and very useful forum. And just give me maybe a few seconds to look for my PPT and share my PowerPoint also. Just 1 minute. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. You can put it in presentation mode.
Yes.
Sir, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you. I made a little change in the title, and I thought that the themes which are coming as the I would say the central highlight from the G20 the deliberation outcome also, that is more on three aspects, and the three aspects, how do we look at the integrated the ways to address those. One is that looking at the long-term sustainability, including environmental sustainability, and the how do we address the challenge of climate change in the current context, where not only reducing greenhouse gas emissions or shifting to cleaner technologies, but being better equipped and able to address the challenges which are already being precipitated by the impact of climate change. So extreme events and related the disasters. So the three aspects which also call that how these the global policy regimes, now we look at the local versions. So basically, how do we operationalize at local level? So that is a great challenge. The another at the same level, another level of layer of challenges that we have the now very good scientific environment at global level. We are also in the era of the disruptive technology, where we have changed very, very fast over past 2 decades. In fact, the generations we belong to, our generation has seen the most drastic, we can say that evolution in technology. Alongside that, the scientific percolation to policy making. But the third dimension, that how this science policy linkage uh, helps the interface with practice, so ground level. So these two aspects finally I would say that collide at talking about the local level. So this is the aspect I want to talk about. So in the backdrop, what has been our experience over the past 30 years or so, that with the interventions in improving our emergency preparedness and the improvement in early warning, the better predictions of the climatic the events, more particularly the disasters like cyclones, we have been able to reduce the risk and damage to the life. But on the same time, the damage to the infrastructure, damage to economy, and broadly we say that damage to other aspects of development has increased much. So a new kind of dichotomy has emerged, that on one hand, we have the happiness of success, that now there is much lesser loss of life. If we just refer to Biparjoy cyclone, so in Gujarat, we claim that it was a zero casualty. But the same cyclones, the neighboring states where it was not actually the area of landfall, they were casualties. But certainly there are improvements. But there are a lot of new windows where which are presenting challenge and which warrant our sincere the efforts to address those aspects. So broadly saying, the COP Conference of Parties of UNFCCC, starting from COP 26 and then intensified in COP 27. The focus on the sustainability and climate discourse has brought in the new central focus, that is on damage and loss. So this new focus is basically a realization that despite of our best efforts, the extreme events are increasing, and that is resulting into the increasing trend and the damages related with disasters. At the same time, these are also creating damages to ecosystems and environmental productivity. So it's a kind of a two-way sword, because the environmental damage is further linked to exacerbating the risk of new disasters. So a kind of a this is, we can say many times, it is a synergistic kind of effects. Then what has also been the recent observations, the COVID-19, we have seen that 2020-21, more than 2 years of period, and COVID, which has been considered as a disaster globally. In India also, we dealt COVID as a disaster under the Disaster Management Act, coupled with the Epidemics Act. And it also brought that disasters can have new faces, and there may be new kind of disasters. So while it is one of the environmental disaster, but it was highly, we can say that a black swan kind of event. So in our industrial risk management also, many times we use the terminology, the maximum credible accidents. So like the accidents which are rarest of rare, very least probability, but is still believed to be possible. So similarly, these kind of black swan events are, which are very, very rare, and but is still believed to be possible. So alongside COVID, what we witnessed that over the recent past, the events like forest fire, the forest fire of Australia, so it was quite large scale, devastating, and recent the forest fire in Greece. So earlier the forest fires were never such global news, because these were not such widespread or devastating. And beside this, these were also not the critical focus. Heat wave has become a focus over past 10 years, starting in India, starting 2015, 16, a large number of casualties, more than 2,500, counting all sides. So it was a great surprise, I would say, and also a new lesson that heat wave emerged as a new form of disaster. So we used to have the sudden kind of disasters and creeping kind of disasters. Heat wave emerged as a new form. Then over the Asia Pacific, dust storms are also emerging as new kind of disasters. Within COVID, we saw the new forms of industrial accidents like LG polymer accident, we all recall, while the lockdown was getting over and industries were reopening. So in fact, the government then was required to prepare a new set of guidelines for reopening of industries. So in a kind of a basically in industries, we have the safe shutdown procedures, but safe restarting procedures were not there. So a new thought process came for safe restarting procedures, that what are the checks that are required, what are the preparedness that are required if industries are shut for some significant time and we are starting, because a number of things undergo change. The sustainability has also undergone the new layers of understanding over the recent past. One is that the sustainability has been primarily the talks and the discussions of the environment sector for quite a long time, starting 1972, Stockholm Conference, then Rio. Certainly Rio brought the focus of linkage of environment and development. But over the past 10 or 15 years, a lot of focus has come on sectoral context. and that is basically the operationalization of the sectorial, the operationalization of the sustainability the approaches, because the development is planned and executed through sectoral planning approaches at national level, at state levels. So these kind of aspects are more promising and therefore required. However, when we talk of these dimensions as critical focus, there are cross-cutting critical focus, and I often refer to two that we can say the disruptive changes. So there are two disruptive changes we are undergoing. One is the disruptive change in the technology. People often refer to disruptive technology. I say that technology has more than the disruptive technology the paradigm. We also have that at the same time where we are talking about the robotics, the effective automation, and alongside the nanotechnology based solutions. We are also talking about the traditional technologies and traditional know-how. And the third dimension in technological advances is the local innovations, which are not high technologies, but the very, very innovative ideas that are contributing to the technological success or failure at operational level. The another dimension that is equally important and for looking at the sustainability is of the societal changes. In fact, the society is also undergoing disruptive change. So any kind of the sustainability approaches basically has to have an introspection, have to have a relook, and alongside the shift in technology, the people's approaches and people's behavior, people's dealing with each other, the construction of family, construction of society, that is also changing. In the construction of neighborhood has already undergone significant change. So when we talk about the risk reduction, the disaster response, or the climatic actions, we have to see that whatever models, whatever approaches we were talking 10 years or 15 years before are not going to work. Those require significant alterations, significant change. Now we talk of the smart city, which are primarily the focus that the supplies and services may be effective with the effective use of the AI and other aspects of other forms of technology. But then there is a question that if we just take an example of water and to ensure that effective water supply and water related services, the first question is that where is the sustainable availability of water resources? So I think access will come later once we have the adequate resources or adequate and effective management of resources. So if there is no water, how are we going to use this technology to ensure water supply? So I think these are the new questions which are coming in the way of understanding the current and futuristic notions of sustainability. So I'm going little diverted from the normal and the central discourses of sustainability or the central discourses of disaster risk reduction, because it is my understanding that we have to revisit the entire thought process of disaster risk reduction, climate action, and sustainability under the emerging new contextual layers. When we talk about the climate change, many times we put climate change as a common culprit for everything. Even for all our wrongdoings, we make climate change as a culprit. We agree that climate change is one of the biggest challenge humanity has, or the earth has, to address, and the efforts are on. But the climate change resulting in devastating extreme events related disasters are not the result of climate change in isolation or alone. There are a lot of contributions from the local changes that help result these kind of changes or these kind of anomalies in the form of disasters. And I often say that there are three types of environmental changes we are undergoing, and those changes are very fast and very alarming. One, of course, climate change, but there are two other changes in the environment. And the other changes, one is the land use changes. Now we have more scientific way of addressing it. We talk of landscape. And the third one is natural resource degradation. So I think the increasing intensity and frequency of various disasters, more particularly the climate change related disasters, but not only these, even the chemical accidents, the occurrence is basically the combination of various phenomena. Maybe in chemical accidents, the trigger factor is also important, but the way the heat threshold has changed in some of our southern states, we see that if we look at the history of the industrial areas, and we find that the maximum the temperature used to go up to 44, 45 degree in some areas, and now it can go up to 48, 49, or sometimes 50. So certainly that is creating new challenges for the safety systems, revisiting the designs, and the warranting new modifications. Also additional pressures for cooling, additional pressures for water. So basically not only to the general administration or general public or community, for industry, for infrastructure, for all kind of sectors, these kind of things are creating new challenge. But the culprit is not the climate change alone, but non-climatic actors also play significant. We also have this kind of scenarios in India too. In other countries also, this kind of scenarios may be possible, but we have this kind of challenges also because we are a highly populous country. And while in some terms human resource is a great resource, great power, but in many aspects it's a great challenge as well. The numbers make us count our per capita contribution to climate change very low, but this also makes us creating huge pressure on our own ecological systems and contributing to climatic challenges of our own. We also had this kind of scenarios during COVID, the lacks of people on road, migrant workers, and this also had a direct connection with the challenges of sustainability. We often refer that the huge number of migrant workers in some of the cities in India. Similar challenges we find, similar scenarios we may find in other countries, like in Thailand. There are several people from Philippines working who are migrant workers. So this kind of scenarios are maybe the scales are different, but we find the similar scenarios in many countries. But if we go to the roots, we find that the challenges are associated with natural systems, challenges are associated with the climatic extremes. In India, most of the climatic, most of the migrant working population in the cities like Mumbai, like the Surat, like Ahmedabad, and many other places, if we go and talk to them, and if we try to understand, we find that the people have come from the places which are chronically affected by disasters, more particularly disasters like cyclone. That is told, that is reported that the cyclones the disaster like cyclones, but also floods, drought, and other disasters. If we talk of the people migrating from Orissa, we often refer that Orissa is the cyclone prone state, but it is not only cyclone that is creating a pressure. We did a study and we found that besides cyclone, in fact, water scarcity and waterborne diseases, cholera, and also the vector-borne diseases, malaria. These were the cholera, malaria were the diseases, were the causes for maximum mortality and not actually the disasters. So basically, there are a lot of complexities in understanding the sustainability challenges when we want to see in the mirror of the climatic challenges and climatic extremes, and as I told, that coupled with other forms of environmental degradations. During COVID, this kind of experience has also emerged. I also already referred to few, like the LG polymer incident, but there were other combinations as well. I myself recall my posting during COVID lockdown phase 1 in the state of Gujarat to oversee and supervise the implementation of lockdown, and then added responsibility to see and help coordinate for finding the solutions of the migrant workers. It was the period when the lockdown was being imposed. It was considered necessary for saving life and to reduce the spread of COVID-19. But it was also the period of heat wave. And I'm just telling one example that some of our colleagues, some of our officials interacting with police officers asked that why some people we are seeing on the roadside below these trees while the lockdown is imposed. Is it not being imposed fully? Are the people not law abiding or what? We came to know that those were the people which were the industrial workers, and they used to work in 3 shifts, and one shift there was 6 persons, and that the dwelling used to was used by the 3 shift people, so 6 into 3. Now all the work is closed, all the industries are closed, so now they are in fact 18 persons in the same dwelling. How can they live? And beside that, it is a heat wave condition. So basically, there were these kind of challenges which we could not understand in the first instance, but we realized that these are creating a multi-hazard scenarios. So heat waves was there. In the same period, we also had drought. We also had 5 cyclones. Out of that, 2 were the major super cyclones. So how to deal with the cyclone evacuation and take all the people to the safe shelters, where we say that we have to maintain a 3 or 4 feet distance from each other. So these were the kind of a parallel challenges which emerged. So the new era of the multi-hazard risk management has emerged in sustainability regime. Even when we realized that the COVID caused the collapse and wiping out of several industries in Asia Pacific, because in Asia Pacific, more than 70% of the industries or the businesses never had any concept of business continuity management. No plan of business continuity management, except some major corporate houses, some major industries. So a new regime of understanding emerged that how business continuity management is important and integral to overall corporate sustainability or the business sustainability. But in that, how do we integrate the disruptions which are caused by disasters, maybe natural disasters or other kind of shock events, including the health epidemics and these kind of black swan events. So the new layer of understanding and improving in the business impact analysis approach has also come. We also carried out a study to understand that what are the regional context for sustainability, more particularly for addressing loss and damage. So I'm referring to 2 studies out of many. One is the mapping of the patterns of the state-wise trends and patterns of 4 major climatic disasters and 3 biological disasters, including COVID, dengue, and Japanese encephalitis. Climatic disasters included cyclone, floods, drought, and I think one more, heat wave. So basically, the study was done for 25 years, and the 25 years were divided into 3 periods. 3 periods, like currently we say that we are in the Sendai framework period. So Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction started in 2015, and for the period up to 2030. Same period for SDGs and the Paris Climate Accord as well. Before that, we had the 10 years period, 2005 to 15. That was for, we called the Hyogo framework for disaster risk reduction. All these are the Japanese cities where the World Conference took place, Hyogo, Sendai, all that. And before that, we called the pre-Hyogo period. That basically that was a Yokohama strategy period. So one of the purposes was also to see that how the policy shifts brought changes on the ground in terms of occurrence of disasters and impact of disasters. So the common understanding about the patterns of disasters for different states was altered by this study, and in some of the states even now considering the outcomes of and that kind of a the inference of this study, they have started revisiting the entire approach of addressing the environmental issues, health issues, as well as the climate change related disaster issues. So this is one study. Another study is that while we say that we have much effective forecasting, and even we have much effective tracking for the landfall, for cyclone, and for other kind of disasters as well, except earthquake, heat wave, the floods, for drought. Now we have much effective and more scientifically the design framework for prediction and forecasting. Landfall also, most of the cases we have very good success including in the recent cyclones. But there were 2 cyclones, Taute and Yas, where significant number of casualties besides the housing collapse and economic damage was there. So the question arises that 2 questions. One is that first is not actually a question, but an observation that the cyclonic storms, the more stronger and the super cyclone kind of the storms were emerging more on the east coast in the past. So that was a trend, and the west coast was never considered as so seriously vulnerable to extreme or the super cyclones. But over past 5 years or so, we are seeing a significant change in the trend, and now we are getting super cyclones on the west coast as well. So Maharashtra, Gujarat, these kind of states are also getting challenges. And even we saw that when Gujarat was affected, the state of Rajasthan, which is a dry state, which is basically kind of a desert and this kind of state, so arid, that also got a lot of disruption because of the heavy winds and then the downpour. So we took a study that where is the failure, whether it is in the understanding of the narration of the forecast or the early warnings, or whether it is the effective actions at local level by the local administration, or the non-cooperation of the local people or the beneficiaries, or what, or some kind of a challenge in the understanding, challenge in the languages. So basically we did a detailed study at local level, and this also helped us coming up with critical recommendations for improving effective preparedness and effective implementation of that preparedness during the disaster phase, and that help us identify the critical gaps. Also, we based on the study, we could come up with a proposed, it is not the illegal document or a quasi-legal document. We have come up with a recommendation for a death audit mechanism. We didn't call it death audit, but primarily it is the death audit. We say that evaluating disaster deaths and the mechanism is for state and district level. So each and every death, if it takes place, it has to be audited that what went wrong, or why the mortality took place. Because each such case gives us lesson that the future care is much more effective and no such casualties take place. And in fact, that helped the interventions in cyclone, the Biparjoy as well. Another very interesting thing that the challenges, I would say that a great challenge to sustainability. I think this map has some issue, so my apology for using this map. I would not be using this map next time. On the right side, if we look at this map, we find that see the level of deficit, and it is just 1 week of the forecast. 1 week of forecast, and while this year 2023 we faced large scale the flooding. More than 3/4 of the country we saw the floods. Delhi also got a significant level of floods. Himachal, lot of landslides, floods. Uttarakhand, various places we got a lot of floods. But in the same place where we see that in the state of Rajasthan, it 220% of the excess rainfall. So the excess was too much. But on the other hand, the same place, we see that the forecast started coming like that, 55% deficit. Maharashtra, 86% deficit. Karnataka, 71% deficit. Chhattisgarh, 95% deficit. So the purpose of showing this is to indicate about the critical challenge and a new kind of a dichotomy, that it takes time for you to gear up to address the challenges of heavy rainfall, continuous heavy rainfall and floods. But at the same time, the cases starts emerging where which indicate about the challenges of drought. So then there may be challenges of extreme heat, extreme cold waves. Then all of a sudden you start getting the news of extreme warming and extreme heat waves. So round the year, now you are getting a lot of dichotomy, that at the same time you are preparing for flood and you are also addressing drought. You're also addressing the challenges of downpour, but at the also in some parts it is a challenge of the heat wave. And India otherwise also represents a wide diversity of the geological and ecological systems. But now in terms of the repercussions, in terms of the extreme events that we see, those are becoming much more complex and challenging as compared to the past. But as I told that this phase of sustainability challenge, that I consider that not only looking at long-term sustainability, but long-term is constituted by the short-term and medium-term as well. Because if we are facing challenge now, and we are likely to face challenge in the mid-term, we are almost certain that we are going to face multiple and more complex challenges in the long term. So we cannot even talk about long-term sustainability without addressing these shock events. This is just showing a publication of 2010 in Current Science. This was about the land use related challenges, the disappearance of wetlands and water bodies, natural water bodies in these cities, and the projected flood risks. And it was 2011 this article was published, and 2015 when the Chennai was flooded. This article was being discussed by the Business Standard and many magazines, but that is not a matter of happiness. But the question is that the scientific understanding, scientific interventions, if not being used, then in improving the policy process, then I think there is a big question. And in fact, the projections which were given of the flood sites, most of the projected sites for floods, those were flooded in 2015 also. Just give me 5 seconds. I have to just open door for someone to come in. Just one minute, please. I'm back. So sorry for this disruption. I think this point I have already discussed that looking to these dimensions, we find that 3 type of the environmental challenges, and also the settings basically which make these environmental challenges or environmental changes and related extremes result into loss events. Basically, the vulnerabilities are very important. And in fact, when we know that the heavy rainfall is inevitable, we can't do anything about rainfall. So where do we work? And that is the area of vulnerability. How do we work for vulnerabilities to reduce the vulnerabilities? I think that makes a critical dimension of our interventions for the short-term and medium-term sustainability. Certainly, looking at the longer versions of our efforts to address future vulnerabilities would also remain important. So besides technical and environmental dimensions, the dimensions of behavioral factors can also not be ignored. And here, if we look at the current interventions, which are also have the kind of a policy support from the Sendai framework, we see that in the Hyogo framework, the priority 4 was written as addressing underlying causes of vulnerability. Very interestingly, that underlying causes of vulnerability has become the priority 1 in the Sendai framework with the title Understanding Disaster Risk. Somebody will laugh that after working for 4 decades or so, if we say that we have not understood the disaster risk, but this is a reality. The critical challenge of sustainability are related with the impending and unknown risk of disasters, and that is aggravated by the impact of climate change. So how do we look at adaptation, and how do we integrate adaptation with disaster risk reduction, and then mainstream both with the efforts of sustainability is the current focus. And that is the reason in year 2022, first time UNFCCC called all the member countries to contribute national adaptation communication. So India also submitted its national adaptation communication to UNFCCC for the first time. Otherwise, the focus was on nationally determined contributions and the action plan to achieve the nationally determined contributions towards reducing GHG, the emissions, green technology, cleaner technology. But this time now, the focus has also come on addressing loss and damage. And how do we address loss and damage? Adaptation is the key. And within adaptation, it was a multi-sectoral effort and multi-sectoral document where disaster risk reduction has come up as in cross-sectoral the dimension. So whether it is a power sector, if we look at power sector, we recall the incident of the Tapovan, where the glacial floods devastated Tapovan power plants. Also have the challenges, the disaster-related, climatic-related and other disaster challenges for other kind of power sectors like thermal power. Also, then mainstreaming across sectors. Then tools of planning and implementation. I think that is very important because when we say that we have to integrate into various sectors, we need to look at the appropriate tools. I recall the discourse around the present mechanisms of environmental impact assessment, which is required for the clearance for major developmental activities or developmental projects. So there was a discussion that there should be some kind of a consideration of adding some components related with climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. Then later, it was a thought process that should we have new tools, but later it was thought that it is better to integrate this with the environmental impact assessment mechanism because that is already there. But how do we do that? I think that is a big question. While we know that almost the same kind of data set that is needed in EIA can help us coming up with understanding the futuristic impact of developmental activity in terms of disasters, in terms of newer challenges of climate change adaptation. I would say not necessarily the challenge, but some developmental activity may also contribute towards climate change adaptation. So whether it is contributing positively or negatively, both aspects, how can these be assessed? So a new thought process of a new integration tool to EIA, that is disaster impact assessment. So basically, it is not the risk or vulnerability assessment of the development, but it is basically the impact assessment of any major development on the risk setting of that region. So, for example, if we are bringing a new airport, there was a discussion with example of Jewar Airport. Any new airport or any major highway, when it comes, it makes large-scale landscape changes. So large-scale landscape changes will also bring the changes in hydrology. Various other kind of challenges also. Changes in biological settings or land cover, green cover. And this may have implications on the frequency and intensity of the water scarcity or flooding as well. So basically looking at these kind of things, that how the developmental activity can alter the risk regime. And if we have an anticipatory assessment, that can help us improving the project planning or design itself. The another dimension is basically looking at localization. Localization appears to be a very simple term and appears to be much talked, but basically understanding the localization is not that easy. It's because there are a number of terminologies like globalization, internationalization, localization, and translation. So localization is basically that let it be the global policy, let it be the national version of the same policy or the nation action plan, but how do we customize it to the local needs, basically? And then there it is a blend of the external knowledge with the local experience. In many cases, when we did some effort of the some kind of a pilots, we used the terminology like the shared learning, where we tried to bring the high level technological knowledge from outside, like the climatic forecast, but then also we integrated with the past climatic extremes data, which is already available with the local administration, and also the local experience and the traditional wisdom, and to see that whether both are in sync with each other or not, and then coming up with the local ideas, the ideas from the local administration or the local governments, that what should be done to overcome these kind of challenges, and also looking at the futuristic thought process. So COVID has also taught us the new lessons, like one is self-reliance. India is the first country which has raised a specialized force, a specialized response mechanism to address climatic and other kind of disasters, and that is known as National Disaster Response Force. But that is a national force, and disasters are often of local nature. While NDRF has been doing excellent work, not only in the country, it has also helped outside the country. Many in Syria, in Turkey, in Japan, in Nepal, various other examples. But we need to focus on self-reliance, and that will help better understanding of local context, because the people have local context, culture has local context, geography has local context, the food requirements have local context, and more particularly, when we talk about the sustainability, it also needs to talk about the local resources. So, and the disruptions of the supply chain that COVID has made us understand, the disruptions of supply chain. Another example is Jammu Kashmir highway, when there is any kind of a major landslide or huge fog. So how it disrupts the all transport and the supply chains, all fruits, all these vegetables which are perishable products get perished. So that kind of challenge. So looking at self-reliance, and that is the reason now focus is on state disaster response force and local disaster response force, and promoting volunteerism. So now the focus is on Apada Mitra, a new scheme government is promoting, where local level volunteers are being trained and being professionally and equipped in the terms of resources, and who have much better synergy, much better linkage, much better understanding with the local community as well. Then integrated planning process. I think that is very much needed, because if we just take example of a district in India, district is the key planning unit. We have several kind of plans being prepared at district level. We are preparing as per the Disaster Management Act. All the districts are being, they have developed disaster management plan. Now we have the National Action Plan on Climate Change. So alongside NAPCC, we have SAPCCs. But now we are discussing that we need to have district level climate change action plans and district level adaptation plans. Under the recently added new national program on climate change and health, all the districts are asked to prepare the health adaptation plans. We have prepared National Health Adaptation Plan and also given a prototype for the state level adaptation plans. Now state are asking all the districts to prepare their health adaptation plan. Very interestingly, it was year 2019, the Supreme Court directed that all the districts should come up with environmental action plan. So I think there are several action plans, and if we look at those kind of the framework, there are a lot of overlap and therefore a lot of opportunities for synergy and integration. So all these plans, how do we create synergy? Because resources are common, the stakeholders are common, people are common, the landscape is common. So that is significant need. The integration is also required from financial angle, because when we say climatic extreme or disasters, basically it requires the financial support. It requires the financial innovations in terms of the catastrophe bonds or insurance mechanisms, other kind of local dovetailing, maybe the CSR and other kind of things also. Then promoting micro credit, micro insurance kind of things also. Then National Disaster Risk Management Fund and State Disaster Risk Management Fund. Alongside that, we have the Adaptation Fund, and a lot of overlap. The Adaptation Fund also talks about interventions in resilience. The National Disaster Risk Management Fund also talks about the disaster risk mitigation, which talks about vulnerability risk reduction, preparedness, early warning system, and those are the common things. So voluntarism, I already discussed. Recently, government has come up with a science, technology, and innovation policy, which helps us better access to data. And now we are coming up with a new version of the policy as a sectoral science, technology, innovation policy for climate change and DRR. Recently, we have also come up with a mechanism to quantitatively indicate the level of risk and resilience. So for 4 cities, we did a study: Visakhapatnam, Jaipur, Srinagar, and Guwahati. And basically that, how do we basically assign some quantitative values to different parameters that can help indicate the level of risks and level of resilience our cities have. Then how do we look at the underlying causes of loss and damage? There are a lot of discussions about how do we address loss and damage by recovery mechanisms. But I think more than while recovery and relief is important, we have to be proactive. And for being proactive, we need to understand that what can make our efforts fail. So basically, those are the nuts and bolts we may have to work. Beside that, when we talk about sustainability, it is also important that while we may also refer about the data gaps, we may also refer that the lot of work is to be done and the work is scanty. We find that there are significant works are there, but those are scattered here and there. How do we integrate those knowledge so that that can be put into practice? So we are also working towards coming up with a climate knowledge network, and I would be showing a framework of climate knowledge network here. But before that, some of the recent initiatives from our side. We had implemented a major project with support of the National Mission on Strategic Knowledge on Climate Change, issued by Department of Science and Technology. Project title was Climate Adaptive Planning for Resilience and Sustainability. Then, jointly with WHO, we came up with National Health Adaptation Plan. So the project was the health, resilience, and capacity building. And as an outcome of that intervention, Government of India, Ministry of Health has established with us a Center for Disaster and Health. So basically, how health emergencies can take the form of disasters, and other way around, how health implications are becoming challenges during any kind of disasters, and more particularly climate change related disasters. We also had a major discourse titled Resilience and Sustainability Summit for Vision 2047, because this is we are in Amrit Kaal and 100 years of India's independence. So basically, we are everything is. I think that we are going to have a entirely new set in terms of technology, in terms of society, in terms of governance. So whatever we are discussing now, when I just to share that when I was asked to lead a team for preparation of the Vision 2047 for climate change related disasters and the broadly disaster risk reduction. My concern was that the people who are preparing this vision for 2047, do we have the adequate representation of the people who are going to lead in the year of 2047? We are certainly not going to lead. We are not sure whether we will be there or not. So why should we not look at the generations which is going to lead at that time? So basically then it was a thought process, and then we started involving the younger generations, their thought process. Certainly there are a lot of, there will be a lot of uncertainties of the scenarios of 2047, but we also have to start thinking of the not only 47 or 2050, but 2080 or 2100 also. There will be huge uncertainties, but we have to start peeping into the future, and that is very much needed for the journey of the developed nation or developed Bharat that we envision. Then life mission, we all know, but life mission is a great call by the Honorable Prime Minister, but also requires great level of innovations and interventions. It has not yet taken the real impetus it should have, and it requires concerted efforts from all sides. Now, G20 brought the focus on the new kind of disasters like forest fire. Now, the new kind of phenomena that we are witnessing, like drought, we always used to talk that drought is a creeping disaster. Drought is a slow onset disaster. A new form of disaster, drought is now being recognized that we call the flash drought. We used to talk about the flash floods, but we never thought of the flash drought. Now the flash drought is the new phenomena. That is sudden drought. Everything is all right, but all of a sudden we find that the soil moisture is depleted. The plants' biological moisture is depleted, and the plants are facing the drought situation. And these kind of
Apologies,
are,
Professor Gupta. Really fascinating.
Yeah. Just give me a few minutes so that I conclude.
But if you could wind up,
yes,
that would be
helpful. Give me a few minutes, I will conclude. Yeah, maybe a few minutes. Thank you. So the new phenomenon, like the flash droughts, another is like the urban drought. These kind of challenges are coming, and over the above, the Asia Pacific is on the very high pace of the infrastructure growth. And that is the reason any kind of sustainability related interventions or disaster risk related interventions has to work towards making our infrastructure resilience. And then that is a very, very important aspect, because that requires huge investment that is facing challenge. So a number of discourses at global level that is taking place. Also the new regime that is the new specialization in sustainability and disaster risk reduction that we call the ecosystem-based approach or nature-based solutions, that is also being discussed. This is about the thought process about disaster impact assessment that I was talking about. Then the district level planning process, considering the sustainability and climatic dimensions. Gorakhpur model, basically that was the first such attempt. Then looking at the district departmental dimensions and integrating climate change adaptation. Then various levels, like starting from neighborhood, ward level, and then coming at city level. So how we consider the local level concerns into larger level planning. This is about the shared learning approach. So two wheels, one is understanding vulnerability. And basically on that, we act as catalytic agent, not actually as an expert, but just we facilitate this process for planning for effective resilience. And that helps us bring basically the convergence between the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach. I think that is very much needed. When we talk about vulnerability reduction, sustainability-centric approach where we focus more on the natural resources, ecosystems, but that also requires the equal emphasis on the social capital related programs. So basically that is the new level of understanding that calls that we create a balance between the requirements in terms of the social capital as well as the ecosystem protection. these kind of compendiums were also prepared based on our interventions, that how various the global good case studies or practices can be applied in the local context. So that is another level of localization. Promoting ecosystem-based approach, as I told, that eco-DRR in the short form, we say eco-DRR or nature-based solutions. So we took initiatives on those dimensions also. This I already discussed, that how do we look at the short-term, the needs of risk management, but also looking at developing the adaptability to address unknown kind of risk, but also looking at the futuristic risk at the same time, so that the addressing the shock events also helps us pave the way of future long-term sustainability. Then there are lateral dimensions, like when we are promoting solar energy. So it also uses a lot of photovoltaic cells, which contain heavy metals. So when we promote climate-friendly technology, there are literal sustainability challenges. How do we address that? I think the countries are learning from each other, and in India, we have recently taken an initiative on this direction also. When we talk about resilience of cities and villages, there is an area that is often neglected, that is the peri-urban area. We did intervention on understanding, and we did studies for peri-urban resilience and sustainability jointly with some of our international partners. Then when we talk about disaster management, we often refer to saving life, but disaster recovery, how to make disaster recovery green and climate proof that recovery, I think that is a great area that is needed globally. And we jointly with some of our partners came up with a manual that how we climate proof and how do we integrate sustainability in our the post disaster interventions. So a number of such publications are there, nature-based solutions. Then this is on Mission Life. Then several other publications on localizing the sustainability and resilience agenda. How do we address the specific vulnerabilities of children, the girl child? Then these kind of publications like compendium on nature-based solutions. So these are various dimensions, but the final word for sustainability from my side, and I take the lesson from Lord Buddha. In fact, all the religions of the world have similar kind of a thought process, similar kind of lessons, that middle path is the way to wisdom. We need technology, we need the materialistic development, but at the same time, we need to make a balance with the natural conservation and ecosystem sustainability as well. So with this, thank you very much. Here is my ResearchGate address, and some of our publications are available on my ResearchGate. Any of the participant, if you are interested, you can look at my ResearchGate. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I can take some of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an informative session. I would request Mukul sir to give his remarks before we move on to the Q&A session.
I think in view of the time, I will just say that the new perspective that you have provided to sustainability and the kind of solid research that you and your organization are doing and the thinking process that is going on is a very good example for the students of public policy to learn from when they approach the issues of environment, sustainability, and disaster management.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, I would request the participants to put their questions in the Q&A box or raise their hands for the same. Sir, do you want me to wait or
I think
if participants have any question, they can ask. Or let me quickly ask one question from Professor Gupta. Sir, there has been a lot of now focus on climate change and especially on disaster. Even though if in international relation, even those countries, those who are not talking to each other, they come together towards
Yes.
goal. How do you see this as a phenomena? And this is a recent thing. How do you see this, and how optimist or pessimist you are towards how we will achieve being a developed country in the Amrit Kaal? How do you see this happening?
I think very, very important and a little critical question, Dr. Arjun. In fact, in some other ways, we call it a new diplomacy. Disaster diplomacy is bringing all together. So basically, the earlier kind of the diplomacy is slowly vanishing, and basically the new diplomacy is of cooperation. And there are several type of cooperation. Even if you see that any kind of bilateral dialogues of technology cooperation, there also the cooperation, if you look at the list of items under technology cooperation, certainly the cooperation related with clean technology, cooperation related with climate change adaptation, cooperation related with disaster management are usually common. Many of the multilateral, it is the almost it is there. G20 first time the new working group has come on disaster resilience, besides a group on climate change and environment. While there is a lot of overlap between the two, because forest fire, land degradation is kind of a common dimensions. Then if we look at the placing of India, we have no other way than to cooperate, because there are many disasters which are of transboundary nature, between Nepal, India, between India, Bangladesh, then Bay of Bengal, the Bay of Bengal, the under the initiative, under the BRICS. And I would certainly like to especially emphasize the success of the G20 diplomacy. I myself was witness to basically the negotiations for the outcome of the disaster risk reduction group, and the countries which may have lot of differences on in other dimensions, but when it, about for disaster risk reduction, their voice was one. So because these are the common challenges, and even when there is a disaster, or even when there is no disaster in the pre-disaster phase, we need to learn each other, we need to cooperate. Another dimension that has emerged, that the countries which we were thinking that very highly advanced in technology, now they are coming forward to learn from even the smaller countries. Even not only India, but the countries like Sri Lanka, countries like the least developed countries also, because the smaller countries have much better community-based mechanisms. So the technology-based mechanisms, community-based mechanisms, and there are a lot of innovations. COVID also stimulated a lot of innovation environment in our country. So now for DRR, lot of innovations are also coming. So it is also helping us create new business opportunities as well. So I think the entire future thought process, disaster risk reduction and sustainability has all the angle. It has market opportunities. It has social responsibility. It has corporate responsibility. It has the newer areas of research. It has the newer areas of professional advances. So I think it is emerging as a cross-cutting the need. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think there is another question. Somebody, some parts from the
Yes, sir. We have a question from Ashish ji. If you could please unmute and ask the question.
Yeah, am I audible?
Ji,
Yes.
Ashish ji, बताइए.
Okay. So my only point I wanted to raise regarding the Sendai framework standpoint of vulnerability, I was wondering if there is any impact assessment model for the health impact of climate change, one, and two, if there are any epistemic or knowledge related issues in this regard, like we always talk about, problems, but we are not able to give concrete, characterizations of exactly the impact that it is having. So, do we see any movement of that sort in regards to, say, the health impact of climate change? And if not, what are the issues of the evidence base, or say the communities of practice involved in doing so? So that's basically what I want to know. Yeah.
Thank you on for your question. In fact, our center has been created. The one Center for Disaster and Health has been created for this purpose. Basically, as you know, just one example I am giving, that India has a disease surveillance program, India Disease Surveillance Program. So basically, that takes into account the surveillance and data collection for all kind of diseases. Now we are coming up with the customization that a specific data collection, specific documentation of disaster-related health challenges. So these kind of interventions are there. Then second thing, we are also working jointly with the relevant agencies for effective health consequence early warning. Like we have the warning for flood, or the warning for heat wave. So what can be the consequence in terms of health? So basically looking at the both scientific tools as well as the social dimensions also. In fact, we attempted for that. We would say that there were no concrete result, but we attempted academically for finding any kind of linkages of climatic parameters or climate change with the spread of COVID also. However, we could not find any clear linkage, but the methodology that we established will certainly be useful in understanding the future epidemic spreads. So these kind of researches are there, and National Program on Climate Change and Human Health has 20 Center of Excellence in the country, which are working on different domains related with addressing the climate change. Sustainability is a broader goal. So primarily it is on climate change related issues like heat wave is there, the epidemics preparedness is there, then the mass casualty management is there. Even we are talking about the hospital, basically that making hospital and health systems resilient. We know that in past floods, even the health system got affected. So these kind of initiatives are there, and certainly after COVID, a complete revisit has been done, and even the health system infrastructure and health system framework at below the district is also being modified accordingly. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering the questions. Moving forward, the next speaker for the day is Mr. Yash Agarwal, founder of Public Policy India, New Delhi, for a discussion on careers in public policy. We welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Hi, am I audible? Am I visible?
Yes.
Awesome. Can I quickly share a presentation? Yeah?
Yes, sir, please.
I think I'll have to be made.
Yes, it's working. Yeah.
It's working?
Yeah, it's working. We can see full screen now.
1 second, just to make sure that I'm able to shift this.
It went away.
Sorry. How do I shift the slides?
Bottom left. Go to bottom left. Can you see keys there? Go bottom left. Left side. Bottom left. Go left.
Yeah, slide control. Yeah. Okay. I have given Asthaba the slide control. Asthaba, can you see it?
No, not there. Yes, in the screen, come to bottom left. Left, bottom, not right.
Okay.
That. Now.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much, Arjun. Cool. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for taking out the time, to join us for this, session at IMPRI today. Firstly, I just want to start by thanking Arjun and the team. I know it's a very lean team for putting these programs together. The number of people who benefit from them, in very short amount of time, the amount of learning that they derive, it's very valuable. So thank you, Arjun. Thank you for the team for, putting these together and, across focus areas. I know that, it's almost 8:30. I'll keep it, so you must have had sessions throughout the day. You must be tired. I'll keep it very brief, very quick, right? And cover some of the most important things that I feel might be important for anyone looking to build careers in the broader public policy space and social impact space in India, right? My name is Yash. I have worked in I've been working in policy for the last 4 or 5 years now. Started by working in the parliament as a LAM fellow, then worked in consulting for a year, then worked for Twitter, India and South Asia for a couple of years in a public policy and partnerships role. And then I've been running my own consulting firm for ever since. I also run this platform called Public Policy India for the last 3.5 years. You might have come across it, right? So that's about me, right? Without any further ado, why are we even discussing this, right? So, everyone in the room will definitely have very individualistic career paths, right? Very unique career paths of our own. But there do remain some certain principles there, right? Irrespective of the sector that you want to work in, that generally help you make just better choices for yourself, right? And just make the most of the opportunity that come your way. So these are the principles we'll cover. Please don't worry, we'll come to them. But firstly, even before that, right, at a very practical sort of a level, what is public policy and how is the space structure in India right now, right? So, okay, first thing, there are 5 pillars of policy making globally. Okay, there are 5 pillars which capture the entire policy making process across the world, including India, of course. And it's important to understand them because they tell you about what skills might be needed for you to work in what areas, right? And where is it that you can build careers and so on and so forth, right? So we capture the 5 pillars via an acronym known as IDIME, IDIME, right? You can see it on my screen, I'm hoping. So it's essentially ideation, design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, right? Those are the 5 pillars, right, of policymaking, more or less, right? Keeping aside some nuances. Ideation. So, okay, let's take an example. Say the road in front of your house is broken, right? So, the local municipality or the government already gets an idea that, okay, this has to be fixed, right? Because it has health hazards, there can be accidents, there's loss of economic output, wastage of time, etc. Right? So the idea is, usually it comes from society and, individuals, voters, etc., other stakeholders. So then you design the policy. So you're like, okay, how can we fix the road? So the government has 2 options, right? So either it can hire people to build the road, or, it can just throw money at the problem, right? So get the private sector to build the road and just pay for it. So, the government decides that, okay, it's not worth our time to hire an entire sort of a team of people to do this. We can just hire, get the private sector to do this and we'll pay them, right? It'll be more efficient and, just create jobs in that sense as well. So, okay, they've designed the policy. They have to implement it, right? So, like, okay, how can we do this in the best manner while using the least amount of money, right? Because there's nothing known as government money, right? It's all taxpayers' money. So they're like, okay, let us bring out a tender, right? People will, contractors can bid for it. And whoever bids the lowest wins the contract, right? So we get the work done at the lowest possible price, right? So okay, they bring out a tender, a certain company wins the contract, and they build the road, right? Okay, you have implemented the policy, right? Now you're monitoring it, right? So for example, in the tender itself, they might have conditions that you have to maintain the road for 5 years. If it breaks before that, you rebuild it for free, etc. Stuff like that, right? I'm oversimplifying, of course. So you monitor it for the next 2, 3, 5 years, whatever the time period is, right? And then at the end, you evaluate it, right? That should we work with this contractor ever again? Should we blacklist them? Should we build asphalt roads the next time instead of concrete, right? Should we just build the road ourselves instead of outsourcing it next time, etc. Right? So that they inform your decision making the next time you have to work on such a policy problem once again. I hope that gives you a very clear, simple picture of what the 5 pillars of policy making are, how they work, right? Now, why this becomes important is at each of these pillars, there are different institutions working at different skills needed, right? So, for example, if you tell me that, hey, I want to work in, say, policy research, right, with, say, think tanks, academia, then basically what you're telling me is that you want to work in policy design, right? The design pillar out of the 5 pillar process, right, is when, governments actively reach out to a lot of individuals, institutions, universities, academia, think tanks, right, seeking the inputs on best practices, what to do, what not to, right, when you're designing the policy. Similarly, if you tell me that, say you want to work with non-profits, right, social impact, development sector, then basically what you're telling me is that you want to work in policy implementation, because that's what like 90% of the NGOs do, right? Bring policy initiatives closer to the people at the grassroots, right? Teach for Indian education, for example. If you tell me that you have a specific technical skill, maybe you're a medical professional, right? Maybe you're an urban planner, right? Maybe you're an engineer with some data skills. Then there's a high chance you work in policy evaluation, right? Because that is the pillar out of the 5 pillar process, at which individuals with very specific technical skills and sought and needed to makes sense if a policy worked in a particular way that was envisioned to or not, right? I hope that makes sense, right? So in every pillar, there are different skills needed. So for example, the skills needed to work in policy ideation are very different from evaluation, right? Ideation is mostly research. Evaluation is a lot of, surveying sort of a capacity, right? Numbers, econometrics. And in each of these 5 pillars, right, there are different kind of organizations working as well, right? So the kind of orgs that work in, say, policy design are very different from implementation, right? Design is mostly think tanks. Implementation is mostly non-profits, right? So I hope that paints a picture, right? So when I work in policy, right, but there are 5 pillars to the policy making process, and each pillar is fairly distinct in that sense, right? Second is, how's the world of public policy structured in India, right? So there's 3 things, right? There's spaces, there's functions, and then there's verticals. Okay, spaces essentially where in policy can you work, right? And much of this has come in the last 5 years. So it's fascinating. So for example, you can work in the research space, right? So again, think tanks, academia, universities. You can work in the private sector space, right? So how I worked at Twitter for a couple of years, right? Most large companies are public policy teams. Even startups do these days. You can work in the public sector space. At the central level, the government of India hires a lot of young professionals, right? A lot of ministries hire, Niti Aayog Invest India, they keep hiring. At the state government level, in the public sector space, you can work, a lot of chief ministers hire fellows, policy fellows, right? You can work, so state governments don't have ministry, they have departments, right? So a lot of state departments hire on contractual roles, right? You can work in the legislative space, right? So the parliament has the Land Fellowship, Mukherjee Fellowship. State assemblies have their own fellowship, Delhi Assembly has DRC, etc., right? You can work in, what we call the policy consulting space, right? So KPMG, Deloitte, BCG, PwC, they have huge government affairs practices, right? Different names: social impact practice, public affairs practice, public policy practice, government relations, whatever. But basically policy work, right? In fact, there are so many niche policy firms, which consult only in policy mandates, right? So like Samagra, GDI Partners. I run one such firm myself, right? Prophecy. Just so many out there and growing. You can work in the political consulting space, right? So say a place like IPAC also. They hire a lot of people, honestly, mostly people with policy background, because at the end of the day, technically, politicians are the selected lawmakers, right? You can work in what we call the social impact space, right? So again, teach, fund, and education as an example, right? That's a huge space onto itself. You can work in what we call the supranational entity space, right? So that's any large global org with an India policy presence, right? So UN, UNICEF, UNDP, World Bank, JPAL, etc. Right? I can go on and on. So there's hundreds of spaces that you can work in, and in each space there's hundreds of organizations that work. Does that make sense, right? Second is vertical. So vertical is essentially, what is your sectoral focus area that you're working on, right? So, everything under the sun has a policy element, from gender, healthcare, education, environment, climate change, whatever, right? So even within that, what is the sector? What is the vertical that's, your area of work or focus? So usually it's a good idea to try out different verticals in the early part of your career, right? Via internship, via volunteering, whatever, right? And then eventually via full-time jobs and all, you become an expert in something, right? Eventually you specialize in something, right? So that's verticals. Finally, function. Function is, in what role in policy are you working? So again, spaces where you're working, vertical is in what focus area, function is in which role, right? So where, which, and what, right? There's a method to the madness. So again, coming back to function. So if you tell me that, hey, I work in a design, marketing, outreach sort of a role in a public policy firm, then your function is comms, right? Communications. Similarly, if you tell me that, hey, I work as a program manager in a policy firm, then your function is operations, right? And if you work in a risk advisory sort of a role, right, then your function is legal. Again, hundreds of roles and different functions that you can work in a policy firm. Now, why this becomes important is, if you think of it, every single job lies at the intersection of these 3. Like, this is literally how the space is structured. Every single job will be in a particular space, focus on a particular vertical, involve a certain function. Do that, like take an example for yourself. Every single job, this is how it is basically structured. Why that helps you? Because the next time you're looking to apply somewhere, right, and maybe you don't get the role or whatever, you think you might not get it. Just you can do an analysis for yourself now that, boss, what is the gap? What am I missing, right? Do I not have enough experience in this particular vertical? Do I not have enough skills for this function? Or do I not have enough of a background in this particular space? I hope that makes sense, right? You can, otherwise it seems like a big wall, right? You don't know what's going wrong. But, now you can do a broad analysis for yourself that, okay, this might be working, this might not be, right? And then you can try and fill in the gap, right? So that's basically how the world of public policy is structured in India, right? Now coming to, I just want to cover 5 principles, right? Firstly, skills. What are the skills that you need to work in policy? You can leave this feed, right? I hope that's on my full screen, which is, one day the only jobs people will do will be jobs only people can do, right? one day the only jobs people will do will be jobs only people can do, right? So anything that is even remotely structured, repetitive, scalable can and will be automated, right? Chat GPT, right? Imagine who knew that, rudimentary writing could be automated, right? Is the human element, human aspect of every skill and every job that is valued more and more, and that will make you indispensable, right? So there's a reason that we pay more for handmade bread, artisanal furniture, whatever, right? Because there's a higher percentage of human element in those products, right? Similarly, it's across fields and jobs and careers and structures, right? So human aspects of every job, like critical thinking, communication, stakeholder management, right, empathy, time management, and all of it, they have become really, really important for you to stand out and hold on job and even grow in it, right? Hard skills like, website design, coding, whatever, it's something you'll figure out and you'll pick it up. Honestly, it's fine, right? But these are skills that really come to matter and stand out, right? So these are skills that matter. Sample it out. So this is what we were talking about, which is everything under the sun, again, has a huge policy element, right? How do you figure out what is your fit and what is not, right? No amount of Googling and reading will teach you what you're the best fit at, right? What's your competitive advantage? It's usually the best idea to try, to sample different fields out, right? So you can intern somewhere, you can volunteer somewhere, right? When I was in college, I went to, Symbiosis Pune, 2016 to 19 for a degree in journalism, right? A BA in journalism. And in 3 years, right? So 6 semesters of college, I did some 8-9 internships, each in different city, different vertical, different function, right? Government of India, Teach for India, Ministry of Health, Member of Parliament, etc. When I came to policy, I was like, I'm going to change the face of education in India. But within 15 days of working with Teach for India, I was like, I can never do this job because the kind of temperament and patience you need to work at the grassroots is different. And I don't have it, and that's fine, right? But the point is, only practical exposure to different fields will teach you this, right? So you should definitely sample it out, right? Before, settling in that this is what I want to specialize in. This is what I, wish to go in depth in, right? Show and don't tell. Okay, so think of it this way. India is a very low trust society, right? It's a very low trust society in general. We're very suspicious of new people, strangers, and even people we are familiar with at times, right? There's a reason that the Tatas can sell us anything and we buy it, from salt to steel to software, right? Because they've acquired a sense of trust. So in a low trust society, in the absence of reliable, credible markers of trust, what you do is you borrow trust from institutions. So, for example, if you were to be hiring me today, right, you would be like, yeah, I don't know if Yash is good at policy advocacy or not, but Yash has worked in Twitter, in consulting, in the parliament. He might be good, right? You're just borrowing trust from the institutions I've been a part of, right? So the point being that, more than any degree, any sort of this thing, 2-year, 4-year program, work matters more than anything else, right? Work is what will get you jobs. I know many people from the fanciest of universities in the world who are, still looking for jobs in India. And then I also know, today the heads of public policy for some of the largest companies on planet Earth who have a BA in sociology, right? I myself have never studied policy, right? I just have a BA in journalism. That's it. No masters, no policy, nothing, right? So I hope that you have that mindset that, any internship that you do will really help. Any volunteering, any part-time work, consulting, any job, that will really help you build your profile, get better exposure to this field, get a better experience, and then really build out your career, right? So there's that. Spread the word. This is the reason that I'm here chatting with all of you today, right? So here the concept is basically you can literally become luckier. Okay. So how does that work? So it's, there's a concept known luck surface area, and you can read it on the screen, I hope. So it basically says that it's important to do good work, but it's equally important to talk about it, right? And when I say talk about your work, the last thing I mean is bragging, right? That's not the point at all, right? The point is you just communicate what you're working on. Maybe some challenges you're facing, right? Maybe somewhere you're struggling, right? Communicate that. Maybe just ask out for help, right? Maybe communicate how someone else can support you, how people can partner with you and work on something more impactful, right? Etc. Right? But just have a sense of communication with your community, with your broader audiences. You have no idea what that might lead to, right? Every single career opportunity I've had come my way in my life, like full-time career opportunity, I've known of them because some stranger on the internet, right, thought that, oh, Yash might be interested in this, right? Because they read my post, they know what I'm interested in, what I'm good at, what I'm not so good at, etc. Right? So do that, right? So basic stuff like building a website, or personal websites for free, by the way, right? YouTube will teach you everything. Having a very well done resume, right? Having a portfolio of work that people can easily access. They all really matter, right? So spread the word. If you build a personal website, put it on the internet, it works for you 24/7, even when you're asleep. Why would you not, want that advantage for yourself, right? So that, and the final bit, right? So shun the competition. So we have all been there, right? So that we apply for a policy job and we just don't hear back, right? In India, the moment there's a job opening or an internship, some 5 crore people apply or something, right? It just gets lost in the race, and there's nothing you can do. It's not your fault, right? Just that's how structurally it is. But what you can do is, you can just skip the competition, create opportunities for yourself, right? Like, all these 7-8 internships I did in college, not a single one was an internship opening, not a single one, right? These are all opportunities I created for myself. How? I would reach out to, individuals and institutions via cold email, DM, asking my professor if they can put in a word, asking my previous manager, my previous workplace if they can refer me somewhere, friends, family, whatever, right? And I would usually create opportunity. I will reach out to people, tell them, hey, this is my work portfolio, this is my website, this is how I can add value, this is what I worked in the past, and the other things your org is working on where I can add value. Let me know if we can chat, right? All 8 internships I created, none of them existed, right? And those internships are the reason why I've been able to build whatever career I have, right? So shun the competition, right? Of course, if you like a job, come across an opening, please apply, but please go beyond that as well. That is all I'm trying to say, right? And create opportunity for yourself. Very quickly, this is what I want to share in terms of some principles, how the world of public policy is structured in India, what the pillars of policy making are. Now, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, sir, for such an insightful session. Before moving on to the Q&A session, I would request Mukul sir to give his remarks. Sir, if you are there.
Oh, sorry. I just said let's go to the Q&A session because this is really for the participants. So
Yes, sir, sure.
let them ask questions.
Yes, the participants can post their question in the Q&A box or raise their hands.
While they are doing that, yes, good presentation. I will say one thing though, that depending on whichever vertical or function it is, the willingness to really put in effort to develop real deep expertise in an area is very important.
Absolutely.
So you could be, your vertical could be the defense budget. So you have to put in so much effort. And today, a lot of people want to have shortcuts so that they are not developing the core deep expertise that is needed, where people will seek you. Okay, your approach is very good, but this is good at the beginning level. But once you go up in the career, then it is the rest of the people that have to seek you. And why would they seek you? It's because you have developed that expertise.
Yeah.
And we should emphasize that.
Absolutely agree, sir.
Any questions?
Sir, we have a question from Rahul ji. If you could unmute and ask the question.
Hello, Yash. I am Rahul from Kolkata. I have been following you on LinkedIn for quite some time and quite interested to look at your work. So I am interested in finding some work in public policy in the urban development space. Can you guide me how I can go about it?
I think my entire presentation was just about that, Rahul, which is like, you'll have to create credentials for yourself, right? So it can be via interning, volunteering, whatever, right? Have a better sense of, how the space is structured, what the 5 pillars are that we just discussed, right? In which pillar, what kind of skills are needed, where you can work. That is also, something that we covered. And also, have a sense of how the space is structured, right? So what we just discussed, spaces, functions, and verticals, right? So where is it that you have a gap, right? Where is it that you can probably work better, right? Stuff like that. And just then start applying, right? Keep, I mean, of course, to role openings, but also write to people, right? Individuals, institutions, reach out via your networks. Just have to get started somewhere, right? Your first job, will not be with the biggest name out there, and that's fine. But the idea is to get a foot in the door and then climb up the ladder, right? So I hope that answers the question. I know I was born and brought up in Calcutta, so have done the very exact same journey, right? And it's something you can do as long as you just have that initiative and you're pushing at it.
So basically, applying to a person is better than applying to organization. You are saying, means personally.
No, I'm saying you have to do both, and you have to do it better.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Rahul, two of my former students have started a research consultancy firm on urban issues. They focus on smaller cities. It is called, the organization is called Nagrika. And if you write to me, I will put you in touch with them. They are in Dehradun, actually. And so they might be able to advise you better. And I can put in a word for you so they respond.
Okay, sir, I will get in touch. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
If there are any further questions.
Not on Yash's session, but on the program as a whole, if I can do some concluding remarks. Tomorrow is the last day of the program. We have presentation on urban policy, but the last session is on the mega messages which the participants are able to think about involving the full course. So we have 1 hour that is set aside for that. And I request all the participants to think what are the mega message. Doesn't mean a technical concept or something. It is something that will transform, or at least a major change in the way you think, the way you look at an issue, the way you will behave. So we will, that 1 hour presentation, I would like the participants to start with their mega messages. I've already sent the slides to IMPRI for about what I think are the mega messages. So we will combine the two and hope we have a good interactive session tomorrow.
Thank you, sir. If we don't have any further questions, we will move to the vote of thanks.
Please.
As we come to end of the day 8 of 1 month immersive online intermediate certificate training course on the contours of public policy in India in the Amrit Kaal, I, Astaba Jadeja, researcher, IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose a formal vote of thanks on the behalf of IMPRI, Center for the Study of Finance and Economics, New Delhi. We are grateful to our experts for day 8 of this course, Professor Anil K. Gupta ji, Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan ji, and Mr. Yash Agarwal for taking out their valuable time and giving an opportunity to the participants to learn from this online certificate program. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We look forward to welcoming you tomorrow, that is 30th September at 6 p.m. for the 9th and the last day of this certificate course by distinguished experts, Professor Chetan Vaidyaji and Professor Mukul. We are grateful if you are watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a good evening and thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.